when I get stressed is when I don't accept the way things are. And it's like, would've, could've, should've,
Mm,
what if? I just don't do that. What I have done is spend a lot of time with 16-year-old Melissa, 20-year-old Melissa, 22-year-old Melissa. And instead of shaming her or being embarrassed by her or negative self-talking her for being so dumb and making so many mistakes, I've really worked to reintegrate her into my current life, almost reparenting. Like, you did
yeah.
the best you could to see us through an incredibly difficult time, and you did it. And I'm so grateful to you. And I love you so much for doing that. And also, the coping mechanisms that you had then are no longer serving us. I don't need you anymore. I am the adult. I will take care of us now. You can just like go rest and be a kid. Those are the
Yeah.
conversations that I've had so much of with the help of my therapist and my own work. So I don't ever think about what if. I just think, how do I heal the relationship that I have with my past selves now to be more, I think, at peace with the way things have gone?
What does it take to put your life's work out there in a really big way? How much can I do with this one precious life? Welcome to The Selfish Gift. My guest today is such an inspirational figure for anyone wanting to live a happier, healthier life, and for anyone really wanting to make a massive mark on the world through writing books and through their business. Melissa Urban is a 7 times New York Times bestselling author, including, and I'm sure that's soon to be 8, Melissa, including the #1 bestselling book, The Whole30, which came out 9 years ago and has since become like a giant lifestyle brand for which she is the CEO and, of course, co-founder. And the Whole30 book is set to release a major update this summer in August 2024. You may also know Melissa from her best-selling book, The Book of Boundaries, or from her Substack, XOMU, which I am a subscriber of. And she's also a prominent keynote speaker, of course. She's been featured in by every single big media outlet out there, from the New York Times to Good Morning America. And she lives in Salt Lake City, Utah. Final note in your bio. Well, this is me writing your bio for you, Melissa. She also just is one of the realest and I think most authentically uplifting people on social media. And she has legendary hair. I am beyond excited for this conversation. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Maggie. I'm going to have you introduce me everywhere. Please come with me on my upcoming book tour.
Done. So we have so much to talk about, and I feel like there are just like, an endless sort of number of directions that we could go in. But before we get into that, I just want to say this to you. I'm really super honored and excited to be having this conversation with you. And I just want to say this. I know I am older than you, but if I had to sum up your vibe as I experience you, I would say that you have big sister energy.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, I am an oldest. I am a big sister in real life. But I love that. I love that I can be that person for others. I think that that's the best.
Yeah, I was, gathering kind of quotes and that kind of thing in preparation for this conversation. I came across, I think it was a social media post that you shared where you quoted a follower who had said to you, "You make me feel safe,"
Mm.
and I concur. I think that that's a huge part of what you bring to the world, and more than that, it feels like you're kind of like a champion for my joy and for my well-being. So I wondered, do you get that a lot, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I do get that a lot. Uh, Many years ago, I started getting direct messages from people who would tell me things that they had never told anybody else. People were telling me about their sexual abuse. They were telling me about their addiction. They were in the throes of addiction and they thought they were an alcoholic or they thought they were a drug addict and they had never talked to anyone about it before. And in the beginning, I was like, why are you telling me? I'm just a stranger on the internet. But I think people reflected that I do make them feel safe and that I do help them, I think, find the permission to have their voice, find their voice, use their voice. The kind of subtitle of my newsletter and my podcast is I'll go first. I'll be the first one to talk about that embarrassing thing or that thing that used to be shameful, my sexual abuse, my drug addiction, my divorce, that one time I got chlamydia in my 20s. I will talk about that. And if by
Yeah.
using my voice, I help give people the confidence and the freedom to use theirs, then in my mind, that's a win. And I think that's probably one of the most meaningful aspects of my work is that people tell me these things that they don't feel comfortable talking to anyone else about. And I take that very seriously.
Yeah, it's a deep honor. And I think that you touched on this a little bit just when you were talking about, having shared about some of the difficult experiences in your past. But one of the things I appreciate most about you, I promise we're not going to have an entire conversation where it's just me flattering you, but there's a lot to, appreciate. So when one of those things is that you really show us your own evolution. I think that is really kind of soothing for the nervous system of any listener. And we're going to hear about how that commitment to authentic growth has shown up in the reimagined Whole30. But first, I just want to ask you a little bit more about like, what is it like to be in the public eye and transparently, going through changes or maybe even a challenging time?
So I do have really firm boundaries around what I share publicly, which probably comes to no surprise, as no surprise to you. But I use a Brene Brown phrase to think about what I share. I share what is personal, but not what is intimate. So
Mm.
I will tell you about what I had for lunch or the, funny thing that happened to me or the embarrassing thing, but I don't share the things that I'm going through in the moment. I save those to process with my husband, with my sister, with my therapist, in my own self work. And I only share about them after the fact when I feel like I have a pretty good handle on them and I'm not so in the throes of the emotions of this difficult thing. I think that helps me show up authentically and vulnerably without feeling like I'm ripping myself open for
Mm-hmm.
the I think consumption of the general public. Give you an example. My husband and I got married and didn't tell anyone for about 6 weeks. I
Oh
said to
my
him,
goodness.
"Oh no," I said, "this is just for us. I want to sit in the joy of this wedding. And we will, if it's okay with you, we will talk about it when I am ready to talk about it because my life is far more public than his." And he was like, "Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Like whenever you're ready." And so when I finally did share about it, I felt like I was able to fully share in the joy of that moment without the sharing taking anything away from the intimacy and the personal nature of that experience. And so that's how I think about sharing. And that's how I can be so comfortable showing up very authentically and very vulnerably, is because I do have that buffer of intimacy versus, personal.
I love that advice so much, Melissa. And I think that it's super supportive and helpful for most of the people listening because, in my experience, the last 15 years or so working with authors, and especially at the kind of like nascent newbie end of the author journey, I know that one of the things that holds us back sometimes from stepping out into our kind of biggest, boldest dreams is this fear of like, oh God, I'm going to be out there, for all the world to kind of like poke fun at and, no clothes on. And especially if you're writing in any kind of topic space that touches on the personal,
Yeah.
that idea that, oh, once I kind of throw myself to the wolves, there's no going back and I don't belong to me anymore. We see how celebrities are treated. And you just given us a really great sort of rule of thumb or framework to think about how to do this authentically and safely. And it
Yeah.
reminds me actually of like something I was reflecting on when I was preparing for this conversation, which is that there and you pretty much said it. There seems to be an inherent relationship between authenticity and boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, there has to be, right? I have to. As you were talking about this, I was thinking there's one other thing that I do, which is in itself a self boundary that helps me show up authentically, which is I never put anything out there until I have firmly decided how I feel about this thing for myself. So
Yeah.
I won't talk about that one time I got chlamydia until I have processed it and thought to myself, this is not shameful. This is not
Hmm.
anything that I did wrong. This is just something that happened. And, I could beat myself up for not being more careful or not, being dumb. But no, I wasn't. I might have been a little naive. I may have been a little impetuous. I may not have been thinking, but thank goodness I learned my lesson, and now I'm able to share this story without any shame or any
Hmm.
self-recrimination, and hopefully help other people think about this ahead of time and maybe avoid these circumstances. I don't talk about anything until I know exactly how I feel about it, which means that what other people feel about it is not really my business and doesn't
Yeah.
impact how I feel about me. Another example of this is that I don't read my own book reviews. I don't
Wow.
read them. No, I don't read them. Book reviews are not for me. They are not for the author. Book reviews, in my opinion, are for other readers to talk about how they chose to experience the book. So when I put out a book, I put out a book that I know is a really good book. I write well. I love the topic. I love the passion that I put into my writing. So when I put a book out, I feel very good about it. And what other people think of it is not my business. And these are all self boundaries that allow me to show up so openly and authentically without fearing what other people are going to say, because what other people think or how they choose to experience it, that's not my business.
Yeah, I love that. And also what you're describing kind of especially about the sort of not sharing until something is really fully resolved inside of you, that is very that's an act of generosity and caretaking that you are doing for your reader. So we were just talking about how your boundaries are a way of caretaking for yourself, as that make it safe for you to share your work with the world and yourself with the world. But this sort of, it's often talked about as writing from the scar, not the wound.
Mm.
And that means, if I'm out there writing about something that's super traumatic that I am in the grip of right now and I have not found a way out, I'm going to be projecting and broadcasting my terror, my grief, my trauma, and it will be triggering, and I don't have answers for myself, for anyone else, right? So but once you have come to a place of like, oh, I feel like I've got something that I can generously offer on this, only because it's kind of worked its way through my system.
Yeah. And there's such a fine line there, because I think about, I got a concussion 5 years ago almost, and I'm still navigating post-concussion syndrome, and it's been incredibly debilitating and frustrating and isolating. And there are times where I share in the thick of a flare that I am struggling, that I feel isolated, that I have, so much empathy for people who are living with chronic illness, invisible illness. But there's still a level of, I won't say editing. I'm not going to show up on camera crying in the midst of my panic attack. I save that for my husband. But it's when I can show up and say, like, yeah, I'm struggling. I'm not only going to show you I'm out of it and it's better now, and here's like the bright shiny. I'm going to show you the rough middle part of it as well. But you're right. I don't expect anyone else to carry that for me. Like,
Yeah.
here's how I'm feeling, here's how I'm choosing to experience it, but also here's what I'm doing. And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
makes a difference too.
Well, because it sounds like in those moments you have achieved a level of poise with your own kind of
Hmm.
present time difficult circumstance, which, and I think it's just so important for anyone who's kind of like sitting on the fence and thinking about writing about something deep and intimate or deep and personal, to hear like, how do I do this well? So, okay, thank you for all of that. Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the new Whole30. But before we get to the new Whole30, can you just, like, for those of us who've been living under a rock, tell us about the original Whole30 and what it is in a nutshell?
Yes, the Whole30 is a 30-day elimination and reintroduction program. It was, it started as a self-experiment in 2009 and has since, of course, grown to become this household name. The program is not a weight loss diet. It's not a detox. It's not a cleanse. It's designed to help identify hidden food sensitivities that may be having a sneaky impact on your energy, your sleep, your digestion, your mood, your cravings, aches and pains, and symptoms. So The program is in and of itself this elimination and reintroduction, but my area of interest and research is really habit and the psychology of
Mm.
change, probably driven in part by my own recovery journey. So there's a lot of habit research built into the program. We focus a lot on helping people restore a healthy relationship with food and with their body. So, the Whole30 is about food, but it's about so much more than food. And the program has proven really life changing for millions of people who have completed it since 2009. And the Whole30, the flagship book that I wrote in 2014, that's the one that has gone on to sell, almost 2 million copies in North
Wow.
America alone. And, that's like
Wow.
the flagship book that has been how to do the program. But as you mentioned, it's 9 years old.
Yeah.
And a lot has changed in the last 9 years.
And then it became much more than a book, as you just touched on. It's also a really big business now, right? And then you've got big, huge, partnerships with food companies, and there is an online program that people follow. It's not just a book that they read or a cookbook. Tell us a little bit more about the various different kind of components of the Whole30, the business.
Yeah, so of course it has turned into kind of a business and a brand. We have more than 140 Whole30 approved partners. So these are big brands that you've certainly heard of. It's Chipotle and LaCroix and Chomps and Primal Kitchen and Siete. And these are food companies or meal companies that make products or meals that are compatible with the elimination phase. So it's a way for our community to quickly glance at a product or on a menu, see the Whole30 approved logo, and know that this food or product is appropriate for their Whole30. Of course, we're introducing these brands and products to an enormous, fiercely loyal community who loves supporting, brands who are looking after their Whole30 commitment. So that's been a big part of the business and the brand for a while. We have so many different ways to do the Whole30. The Whole30 is available for free on our website. It's always been free and it always will. Accessibility is huge for us, but we've got 8, almost 9 now, Whole30 books that are everything from
Mhm.
cookbooks to how-to guides to guided journals to a book called Food Freedom Forever, which is what you do after the Whole30 is over. We've got community cohorts that we run. So if you want to do the Whole30 with a group, you don't want to do it alone and you want that, accountability and motivation and extra resources and, daily videos, we've got that available. We've got a daily SMS text message program where I'll send you a message twice a day through your entire Whole30 with tips
Wow.
and resources specific to that day. So we've really built the program out to be able to help people with any pain point, wherever you feel like you need help along the way. We've got a resource or an
Mhm.
article or a video or some kind of program that's available to help you see your commitment through.
And you, a couple of years ago, put out a plant-based Whole30 program too, right? So when I first encountered it, I was in my cousin's kitchen, and she was saying, like, "There's this thing. It's called the Whole30. I cut out all these things, and then for the first 30 day or the first phase of it, it's just she was eating meat and vegetables and fruit a lot, and I was on a plant-based diet at the time, so I was like, oh, I can't do that. But you've incorporated that into the overall under the umbrella of Whole30 now too. But tell us more about what is in this. I'm very excited about the new book, which you said is not just an update or a revision. You described it as a complete reimagination
Yeah.
of the Whole30. And what excites me the most about it, Melissa, even though I wasn't, doing it myself for the last 9 years, what excites me about it just on principle is that you are in this reimagining, also just exploring things like food accessibility, like privilege, like different kind of cultural foods, etc. So tell me like, yeah, tell me about the new book.
Yeah. So, I've always done all the writing for Whole30 since day one. It's always been my voice. So it goes to imagine that as I have changed and evolved throughout the years, that the program's voice and tone and language would also change. And a lot has happened since I wrote the Whole30 in 2015. I went through a very public divorce and business split. I had a baby. I had to navigate sort of solo parenting with running a business and building the brand, and I got a concussion, and all of these things have kind of changed. I became more aware of the concept of privilege and my own privilege and how my experience in the world is easier simply because of the way that I was born. And so the Whole30 really needed a complete rewrite. There was so much about the original book. It's good. The information in it is still good and solid.
Mm.
But I look back on some of the things I wrote, some of the phrases I used, you know, junk food or making good choices or and I'm like, I wouldn't say that today. I wouldn't talk to anybody like that today because I don't talk to myself like that today. I've learned so much empathy for myself and I've shown myself so much grace over the last 9 years. And that is reflected in the way that I talk to my community, in the way that I purposefully understand their lived experience and how it's different than mine and how I am meeting people where they are now. And if I want the Whole30 to change as many lives as possible, I had to change the way I talked about the program and the way we presented the program. So gosh, we did a 2-year research project analyzing all of the current scientific research to make sure that all of the Whole30 program rules were grounded in science, the latest
Mm.
science, peer-reviewed science. And there will be some rule changes in the new book that only serve to make the program more accessible. I went back and revised the voice and the tone and the language, really emphasizing the idea that food is not moral and you are
Mm.
not good or bad based on what you eat, and there are no good or bad foods. And even the recommendations we make around things like snacking or smoothies or post-workout meals, they're different than they used to be. Understanding that I want to meet people where they are and make sure the program is accessible. There's some, even the most famous language of the Whole30, the this is not hard language. I look back at that and I think I would never talk to anybody like that today. So I rewrote that entire section. The plant-based Whole30 is another huge step forward in accessibility. We launched that in 2022 to give people who didn't eat animal products the ability to have the same kind of non-scale victories that the original Whole30 delivers within their dietary values. And it's not an aside. It's not a, well, if you don't eat animals, I guess here's this other thing you can do. It's granted equal weight in this book with the original Whole30 with the same number of resources and recipes. So I'm really happy and proud of that. And of course, the recipes are all brand new. And we
Okay,
really
great.
worked to include a lot of culturally significant ingredients and
Yeah.
meals and really honor and appreciate those cultures in the descriptions of the recipes themselves while keeping the recipes really accessible.
So if I am a person who has, a dog-eared copy of the Whole30 on my kitchen counter and it's been there for 9 years, there's still something. The changes are significant enough that the new version is worth a look.
It's an entirely new book. It's a whole new book.
Incredible.
And you'll
Okay.
find some, similarities in terms of the language of the rules and maybe the meal template, but yeah, it's all new, start to finish.
And aside from the sociological and sort of cultural sensitivity updates, which I really, really appreciate and think, it's just like wonderful to show that sort of humility and openness to growth. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek or an example of a change in the rules?
No, I can't. You're going to have to wait for the book.
That's all under embargo. Okay. I'm
I
gonna have
will
to buy
say
it
this
and read
though.
it.
I mean, it's not wine and it's not cheese. So I don't want you to get your hopes up, right? We are not allowing those foods back in. But I will say in general that I think a common theme is two things. One, I relied heavily on like-minded people to help me interpret the Whole30 program rules, which means that there was some bias, inherent bias in those rules. And
Mhm.
what that led to was the elimination of some things that probably didn't need to be eliminated because the current research, and of course, this independent research shows that it really isn't as problematic as we thought it might be back then. So that's kind of one, I think,
Mm.
big assumption. And the other is that all of these rule changes, again, only serve to add things back into the elimination phase, making the
Okay,
program
so it's
more achievable.
loosening up. It's loosening up.
Correct.
It's not tightening up. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, that is good to know. And I really love how in our culture we are seeing a kind of a pushback on diet culture for sure, and folks like you who are exposing the myth of healthy foods. There's also, I think, because of advances in technology, a lot more understanding within the sort of general population of the inner workings of our own bodies and how we differ from person to person. I did a thing a couple of years ago. I did a thing with an app called Zoe, where you measure your blood sugar and look at the effect of your blood sugar on effect of certain foods on your blood sugar. And what I learned is that I have a really, really, really poor metabolism for carbs. Like
Oh,
half a slice of the most whole grain bread will send me right up into the high zone. And in fact, now I know I'm pre-diabetic. So I have to be super careful about that. Whereas my body metabolizes fat really, really well. So I can eat avocados and, nuts and all that sort of thing. And that was really, really helpful. It seems to me that all of this is kind of like, these are strands of a trend toward individuality, respecting your individuality, knowing yourself, standing clear and firm on what you do know about yourself, and just not getting swept up in these one size fits all sort of programs, rules, or biases.
yes. One of the things that you will see reflected in the book, because my understanding of diet culture has evolved a lot over the last 9 years as well, is that there are so many influences in our lives, especially as women, whether it is diet culture or religious influence or stereotypically rigid gender roles. Maybe it's our trauma, certainly the media. There have been so many influences that have taught me that I cannot trust my body, that the signals my body is
Mm,
sending me are not valid, should be
right.
ignored, should be overridden, especially in the world of weight loss dieting, intentional weight loss dieting. And one of the themes you'll see reflected in the book is through the Whole30, you will learn to trust the signals your body is sending you, because your body knows what and how much you should be eating better than any calculator on the internet, better than any influencer, better than any study that comes out tomorrow that says X food is good or X food is bad. There is no one size fits all. And people say that makes a lot of sense. I understand, but how do I know what works for me? And Whole30 is truly the answer to how. It's not prescriptive. We don't tell you how you should eat forever. It is a tool to help you understand the foods that work best in your own body and the framework to help you trust that you will make the right decisions for you.
That's so crucial and so empowering. And I guess just to kind of break down exactly what, when you say elimination program, what that means is that you go through a period where during that first phase you take foods out of your diet that are commonly problematic for a lot of people, and then one by one add them back in. And how do I feel? And again, getting back to my little anecdote about the Zoe app, and I had a blood sugar monitor on during those weeks. I learned that I absolutely know exactly, like almost to the minute, when I'm dipping into a hypoglycemic state. And I never would have known that if I hadn't, but just getting back to what you said about not trusting our introception, not trusting our innate wisdom. I have, been known in all my friend groups as the person who'll bonk, if she doesn't eat, and I get hangry and all that. And it's just, for a long time just saw it as something to be sort of like, I'm such a pain in the neck. It's embarrassing. It's silly. I should be, a grown up about it. And now I know that, like, when I feel that sort of shaky, shivery feeling and that kind of it's wooziness, I'm hypoglycemic. And I have now the data to prove it. And so
Yes.
it's so empowering. And so, like you said, just so contrary, so counter to what we how we're acculturated to just override, not even not believe our signals, but actively stuff them away and feel like afraid of them and ashamed of them,
Yeah. Well,
our sensations.
and those signals, I understand the impetus of people, influencers, dietitians, everybody to say, okay, but listen to your body and trust your body. The thing is, with the way that I was eating before the Whole30, even though I thought I ate pretty healthy, those signals were not coming through in an accurate fashion, because the foods
Right.
that I was eating, the super normally stimulating, calorie dense, nutrient poor processed foods that I thought were healthy, the 100-calorie snack packs and the
Right.
whey protein shakes and the low fat this, those foods were purposefully designed to make me overconsume and crave. And, they were the signals that my body was sending me weren't coming through loud and clear. So
Mm,
through the Whole30, because you do eliminate a lot of those foods that are, saltier and sweeter and fattier and crunchier than you'd find in nature, and you're eating whole nutrient dense unprocessed foods that actually have satiety factors in them through the process, you can then kind of filter through the noise and start to hear those signals, and then you can learn to trust them. So much like your blood sugar monitor gave you a protocol and an actual practice to help you reconnect, I think the Whole30 does the same thing.
that makes so much sense. Yeah, and I suppose there's almost like a level of like it's not just habit breaking, it's also, I think, on the microbiome level, kind of almost like addiction breaking, right? Especially when it comes to something like sugar. I have heard that when you're craving sugar, it's not even necessarily always emotional eating. It's sometimes just the bugs in your gut saying, give me sugar.
Yeah, and a lot of people come to the Whole30 self-identifying as sugar addicted. They call themselves addicted to sugar or addicted to carbs. And again, we go back to the idea of changing your habits and creating new healthy habits. But in the absence of the foods that you would normally lean on automatically to relieve anxiety, to self-soothe, to show yourself love, to relieve discomfort, in the absence of those foods, you are forced to create other coping mechanisms where
Right,
you will
right.
learn other ways to navigate those negative emotions or stress or discomfort with new habits and actions that serve you long after the Whole30 is over. So that's another huge benefit of the program, is you start to recognize when you're automatically reaching for those foods or drinks to numb or distract or self-soothe, and then you think to yourself, what else could I do in a way that may be even more effective?
Wow. Okay, I'm convinced this is the year I'm doing it. Okay. Um, Melissa, I want to ask you, let's sort of zoom out a little bit and talk about you some more. Um, I would love to understand uh, what this work means to you and why it matters to you so much.
I never set out to run my own business. I never wanted to run my own business. It sort of happened by accident. I had been doing the Whole30, writing about the Whole30, writing about my own journey kind of on the side while I had my 9 to 5 job. And it had taken off and gained such momentum that I thought, well, if I really want to see where this can go, I've got to jump ship and try to do this full time. And
What
what I
was your nine to
quickly
five job? What were you in the same space or doing something totally else?
No, my degree is business technology, and though I have a
Oh,
lot of fitness and nutrition certifications, I was running an insurance. I worked for an insurance company, running a team of business analysts and operations associates. So that
oh,
certainly
that is
helped
different.
me. It's different. It certainly helped me launch the business. I had a very good mind for business, but I quickly realized that this Whole30 was my passion, and I truly feel like it is my life's purpose. And the best part of my job is getting to connect with people who want to tell me their Whole30 stories. I spent the last 2 weekends in Atlanta at Costco stores because we just launched a Whole30 marinated chicken in Costco in the Southeast region. And we went down to do these fun events and demo the chicken. And I met so many Whole30ers, and every single one of them had a story that left me almost in tears or breaking out in goosebumps. I mean,
Wow.
the impact that this program has, and I'm not doing it. These folks are empowering themselves to make these changes, but I never ever get tired of somebody saying, I'd like to tell you my Whole30 story. And just the idea that we are able to help people change their lives one person at a time. That's why I do what I do. I'm a very impact driven CEO. Profits don't do it for me. Growth doesn't do it for me. I'm really in it for the impact. And that's the thing that I think keeps me going and excited to continue to talk about Whole30 and create new resources and help people succeed with the program 15 years later.
And I know you just described yourself as a kind of an accidental entrepreneur, but you have actually made some intentional moves to make this happen. It didn't really just land in your lap. So, when you kind of zoom out and look at yourself, kind of going about the world and living, living your life, what does it mean to you that you have created this role for yourself and to be living this life?
At my last book tour event, somebody in Chicago said, "Do you ever stop and take a step back and like look at what you've built?" And I thought in the moment, no, not I don't often do that. And it's not that I'm not interested, but first of all, I've been in it since day one. So it is
Mhm.
I still am challenged to not think of Whole30 as this scrappy little word of mouth brand that's just, doing it one person at a time. I don't really think of us as maybe as big as other people may tell me they think we are. And then also, I'm just so deeply invested in the day to day. I'm in the DMs, I'm in the comments, I'm writing the newsletters. If you hear back from me, it's only just me. Nobody else,
Mhm.
is communicating for me. And so because of that, I think I don't often take a step back and look at what we have. But every once in a while, I'll walk into a Chipotle and see the Whole30 salad bowl on the menu, or I will we'll bring home a case of LaCroix or Waterloo. And as I'm opening the carton, I'm seeing the Whole30 approved logo on the box and thinking to myself, yeah, that's actually really cool. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's super impressive, and it's inspiring. I think you make it inspiring over the inspiring nature of it it looms larger than the even the impressive side of it, just because you make it feel accessible to those who you sort of support with your with your content and your presence. And on that note, you're really generous with sharing your workouts, nutrition tips, and even your hair care advice, which listen, I totally did that no heat curl thing.
Yeah.
But my hair is not as thick and plentiful as yours, and so the corkscrews came out really Shirley Temple. Like they were super, super, super tight and curly. But anyway, it's impressive. It's like amazing. But anyway, you very, very generously share a lot of this stuff on your various channels, social media, your Substack. Can I ask you what I don't hear as much about, and I'm curious to know if you're prepared to share, what kind of practices do you have in place that you like to turn to support your mental health or spirituality, etc.? Do you meditate, journaling, prayer? How do you feel yourself in your mind and spirit?
Yeah, I love talking about that stuff. So, I'll talk about spirituality because it's so closely linked to my favorite activity, which is hiking. I call getting
Yes.
out into the mountains going to church. That's church.
Yeah.
I've called that for years. And I have a deeply personal relationship with God. I am not religious. I don't follow any religious practices. I'm not a Bible person, but I talk to God every single day. And he or she or God, the universe, Mother Nature, it's kind of all one and the same in my mind, talks to me. And
Mm.
when I go out hiking, I almost always hike by myself. I don't wear headphones. This is where my brain quiets and I create the space to listen. And out in the mountains hiking by myself, I feel grounded. I feel calm. I feel at peace. Sometimes I work out temper tantrums out there. Sometimes I get really deep messages. Sometimes I'm just so overcome with the beauty and gratitude that I burst into tears at the summit. That has happened more than once, but that's a really important practice for me. It's a combination of moving my body, which physical movement is a huge part of my mental health routine, and just this idea of being outside, feeling both small, but also big and powerful at the same time, and creating that space to listen and talk to God. So that's a big one. I do meditate after every single workout. I have this post workout meditation practice that I've been doing for many, many years where sometimes I run through a practice of gratitude and setting my intention for the day. Sometimes, and this is like where it gets woo, but I'm 70% woo and 30% suit. I will talk to parallel timeline Melissa that
Mhm.
is happier or healthier or more grounded or less stressed. And I will talk to her and say, what did we do to get there? And she will
Wow.
give me messages too. And then I will kind of work in that direction or that path. So I have a lot of practices where I talk to myself. I am in therapy. I love therapy. I will never stop talking about my love of therapy and the self work that I do and the work that I do with my therapist to help me, work through trauma and discomfort and grow. So that's a huge part of it as well. And then I read. I read a lot of books. I read like most people breathe. I always have an audiobook and a physical book going at the same time. I read every single night before I go to bed. fiction in particular before I go to
Hmm.
bed. And that's just my happy brain unwinding place.
No, that's so, thank you for sharing all of that. And I relate to a lot of it too. Hiking is my church too. I think that there is something about being in the presence of nature that just makes our nervous systems unclench. And when you talk about, I love the communicating with parallel timeline, Melissa. Is that what
Uh-huh.
you called it?
Yep.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, I wonder if that is not also just the exact same thing as praying to God. You know, just that it's that timeless and omniscient aspect of the self where we can get so much of our own inherent wisdom without being distracted or derailed by the chatter.
Yes. I mean, I firmly
Yeah.
believe that my body is always trying to talk to me and help me. My body is always trying to tell me what is in my highest interest. And I also believe that of God and the universe and my spirit guides, all perhaps one and the same. So when I have these conversations, sometimes I'm specifically talking to one entity or the other, but I think it is all one and the same. And I think, you know, these, however you want to refer to it, they want to help. They desperately
Yeah.
want to help. And I need to just create the space and then listen and then accept the messages I'm getting. I don't always like them. Sometimes I
Yeah.
argue with God or my parallel timeline, Melissa, or whoever. But invariably, I'm always like, yeah, okay, that's right. I know I need to do that.
Yeah, they do want to help. They do. You know, our spiritual side. You know, sometimes I'll get kind of caught in a little bit of a, you know, kind of human animal fear loop where I'm like, are you sure that God is really on your side? What if, you know, is there really a benevolent force out there? Like, what, you know, is this just a sort of like a self-soothing thing? And I'll have like a little scared mind, thinking this fearful thought. But all you have to do is look at our own natural response to others who are struggling, and you see that like the I mean, this was animated my entire career. My entire publishing program is for you with your business. We want so much to help others who are in pain, and we are so deeply moved and touched by seeing other people overcome those, you know, constraints and adverse conditions. Of course, God wants that for us too.
Yeah. And
Or
this
do
is
you think
another
that's the
area,
same?
to go back to the earlier part of our conversation, this is another area where I know exactly how I feel about this, and nothing anybody can say would take away from this 1%, 0.001%. If someone says parallel timeline, Melissa, that's dumb, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry that you can't experience that for yourself, but like, man, this has been an incredibly advantageous relationship for me. So it's one area where like you can't tell me anything about my
Yeah.
relationship with God. And so, that's how I
Yeah.
feel so comfortable talking about it, is because I'm
Back to
100% secure in
boundaries,
that.
right? I mean, that's a boundary that supports
Yep.
authenticity again. So speaking of parallel timeline, Melissa, you've talked really openly about that you have a history of drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, you got clean. Um, and getting clean after I think it was your second stint in rehab, that put you on a completely new trajectory in your life. You got interested in health and fitness. That obviously led to the Whole30, which began as just an experiment that you were doing privately, personally, and all of this has grown out of it. So just as a sort of an amusing counterpoint, do you ever look back on that fork in the road, that kind of breaking up with drugs, getting clean, and this whole new life that it brought about for you, and think about the poor, you know, parallel timeline Melissa who did, you know, version of you who did not get clean, hypothetically? What would your life have been without that decision?
Yeah. I have literally never thought about that. Not once have I thought about that. And I think it's because, again, I've done so much self work, and Byron Katie is an author. She's got this practice called loving what is. And when I get stressed is when I don't accept the way things are. And it's like, would have, could have, should have,
Mm,
what if? I just don't do that. What I have done is spent a lot of time with 16-year-old Melissa, 20-year-old Melissa, 22-year-old Melissa. And instead of shaming her or being embarrassed by her or negative self-talking her for being so dumb and making so many mistakes. I've really worked to reintegrate her into my current life, almost reparenting. Like, you did
Yeah.
the best you could to see us through an incredibly difficult time, and you did it. And I'm so grateful to you. And I love you so much for doing that. And also, the coping mechanisms that you had then are no longer serving us. I don't need you anymore. I am the adult. I will take care of us now. You can just like go rest and be a kid. Those are the
Yeah.
conversations that I've had so much of with the help of my therapist and my own work. So I don't ever think about what if. I just think, how do I heal the relationship that I have with my past selves now to be more, I think, at peace with the way things have gone?
You're bringing strength and support from the aspects of yourself that can offer it to you, and you're delivering strength and support to the aspects of yourself that need it.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. That's totally what I'm going to do this afternoon. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yay,
um
therapy, right? This is all stuff I learned in
oh,
therapy.
1000% yay therapy, 1000%. Okay, let's talk for a little bit about your writing practice. And I want to take you back to your very first book. How did it come about? And when did you know you were going to put the Whole30 into a book and write it?
Yeah. So this is very standard in terms of my writing process for every single book so far, but we had been at the time, my business partner and we had been traveling all around the country talking about the Whole30 in these nutrition seminars. People were sitting in cold CrossFit gyms on metal folding chairs listening to us talk about the Whole30 for 8 hours. We would do a 9 to 5 seminar with an hour break for lunch.
Wow.
And this is where we were not charging a lot of money for this. I'm not sure we didn't charge at all for a little while, but we were testing our material. This is where we figured out how to say the things we wanted to say and how to say them in a way that really resonated, and what were the frequently asked questions, and could we build that into the presentation so that we answered those questions or solved those pain points in advance. And of course, quickly realized that we were the rate limiting factor in the growth of the program. There were only so many weekends in a year and so many nutrition seminars we could do. And a book really kind of came to mind. It was like, if we could put all of this information in one place and sell it, that would be amazing. I didn't pursue that personally. A publisher, a very small publisher, came to us first and said, would you want to write a book for this? And we didn't know anything about publishing or advances or how the process worked, but it was like,
Mm.
yeah, I'd like to write a book about it. I already had the material and had been practicing the material for about 2 years with these workshops. So at that point, they offered us a book contract. We negotiated, I don't even know. I mean, it might have been like a $2,000 advance. It was like ridiculous. We didn't know what we were doing, but, spent some time, wrote the book, published it, and not immediately upon publication, but a few months later, it hit the New York Times bestseller list, which was
Wow.
never anything I expected, but it was like, oh, amazing. Like, this is great. And so, from there and from that success, the next book, The Whole30, kind of came into my mind. And we ended up working with an agent and, found a whole new publisher. And this was sort of when my publishing career moved into sort of the bigger
So
leagues.
what was the first book then? What was it called?
It
If it
starts
wasn't.
with food. That was the title of the
Oh,
first book in
okay. Okay.
2012. Yeah. And it's still around. It's still available. If you read it today, it is a very different Melissa you're going to hear in those pages. But again, that just goes to the evolution. But it's still, it was a good book, and it really helped to explain sort of the science behind and the why behind the Whole30, when in 2015, the Whole30 was the guide to actually doing the program. That was sort of the next logical step.
So that's absolutely remarkable that your very first book that you didn't even really set out to write, that you didn't set that ball in motion, hit the New York Times bestseller list. How did that happen?
Well, we had been talking about the Whole30 for 3 years at that point. And my philosophy had always been just to give a bunch of stuff away for free. Give it away for free. The program was free. The resources were free. The recipes were free. The articles were free. All of the, PDF downloads and shopping lists. And for 3 years, all I wanted to do was test the material, make sure that it was successful for the people who wanted to do the program, make sure it was efficacious. So by the time we had written the book, people literally said, I've gained so much from the Whole30, and you've given me so much valuable material. I want to support you. I'm going to buy the book no matter what. So I think that really led to the success of the book is we already had this huge, fiercely loyal community, and
Hmm.
we had given them a whole bunch of stuff for free. So when we finally did have something where we were like, hey, if you want to spend $25 on this book, they were like, yep, absolutely no problem.
And then how were you communicating with your audience at that time? Was it a mailing list, or was it all through these live events, or social media? What?
Yeah, we didn't have a newsletter then at all. It was through the website and then social media. And by social media, I mean Facebook at the time.
Yeah,
That was
right.
about all we had. I wasn't even on Instagram yet. But I had, we started in the CrossFit community, which was already so incredibly well connected through online message boards and forums. And so our connection to CrossFit served us really, really well in that when one CrossFit gym had a Whole30 seminar, they posted about it, they talked about it, they shared their gym's success stories with the program, and other gyms wanted to do it. So we were able to tap into this already well-connected network that also served to kind of promote and help us grow the Whole30.
And how did you feel when it hit the New York Times bestseller list?
It was really exciting, very, very surprising. Because again, I think my publisher had hoped it would happen the week of pub and it didn't. And then I was like, okay, no problem.
How
But
are
I
they
thought it was
hoping it hit the New York Times bestseller list with a book that they only shelled out $2,000 for
I know.
the
I mean,
advance
don't get
on?
me started on my first publisher. We'll have that conversation privately.
They
But
had some very high hopes, and okay, yeah, it
I
worked.
was really excited, but it did not validate me any more than the number of people who said,
Yeah.
this book was so helpful in helping me succeed with the Whole30. I knew it was a really good book. Hearing from the community just made me feel really happy. I'm so glad that you're experiencing it in such a positive way. And then that outside, any outside accolades we got from there, we started getting a lot of national media attention, and we were showing up in Cosmo and the homepage of Yahoo, and that was great. It was really, really cool, but not cooler than the people saying, oh, the Whole30
Mhm.
definitely changed my life. And this book played a big role in that.
And so then from there, obviously, your next deal is going to be really different. And you mentioned that you got an agent, and the whole. Tell us like about the publication of
Yeah.
the first original Whole30.
Well, the first publisher was always like, you don't want to work with an agent. Don't work with an agent. They're just out to, take as much money as they can from you. And like, obviously that's not at all the case. And I absolutely love my agent. I've been with her since 2013 and she's amazing.
Hmm.
She's like my gladiator in platform sneakers. Christy, I love you. But we were connected with this agent through another author friend of ours. This author was like, you guys are onto something really amazing. I think your next book has the potential to be big. I would love to introduce you to my agent. She doesn't take a lot of blind introductions, but she knows about you. And so we met with her, and she was immediately Christy Fletcher. She's now with UTA, but she had her own agency, Fletcher and Company. And she was like, what's the idea for the new book? I rolled out the entire book proposal, and she immediately was like, we are going to set up meetings with as many publishers as possible. And we're going to take this book to auction. And we're going to
Yeah.
this is going to be the biggest thing you've ever done. And we were like, okay, sounds great.
And indeed it was.
Yeah, and it was.
So one of the things that I find surprising, refreshing, and really cool about you, Melissa, is that you don't work with a ghostwriter. You actually write your own books. And so talk to me for a minute about what your relationship to writing is like.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, absolutely no shade if you use a ghostwriter. I have several friends who are ghostwriters, and I think
That's
I
right.
reserve the right to use a ghostwriter on future books. I will,
Mhm.
especially personal books. Like if I ever write a memoir, oof, that feels so intimidating, and I will probably want some writing help with that. But I have not up until this point. And it is because, first of all, nobody knows the Whole30 better than me. Nobody could possibly write about the Whole30 better than me. And I would say the same for my Boundaries book. Like that Boundaries book came out of my work with Whole30, and the entire philosophy I have on boundaries and categories and scripts came from my experience. So nobody could write about that better than I do. And I love writing. It is my favorite part of the job. A book, a newsletter, a social media caption, an email, whatever that looks like. I love to write. I write in my head first. So by the time
Mhm.
it comes out on paper, it just feels like it flows. I get so much joy and satisfaction out of writing and editing. And it's definitely hard and painful, but I love putting a book out and being like, that is 100% me. That is my voice. And I will own the things that I look back on and cringe. And I'll own the things that I look back on and think, that's so good. Did I actually write that? That phrase is so good. I don't remember writing it.
That is a good
But
feeling where you impress yourself. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
or your own words give you chills. Do you write
yeah.
on the trail? Do you find yourself when you're out for a hike kind of um getting, words in your head that you then want to race home and write down?
Sometimes I do. I find it's more like in the shower, driving.
Mm.
I'll have this idea in my head of something I want to write about or something I want to share, or how am I going to phrase this? And it just processes in the background, sometimes to the point where I'm not even aware of it. And then by the
Mm.
time I go to sit down to write, it feels like it's already written, or at least 50% written. That's always been my process.
And
So
how much time do you spend writing? Is that something that you do regularly on a schedule, or is it just bursts and fits and starts? How does that work for you?
when I'm writing a book, there is a lot of butt in chair time. And I know that I am most productive in the morning. So I will get up, I'll do my morning routine, and then I'll immediately start writing and block out everything else. And I'm writing, when I'm writing a book, I'm writing 6 hours a day. I'm writing a lot of words at a time, but only to the point where I start to feel like if I'm losing productivity, I'll take a break. Maybe I'll come back to it. Otherwise, I mean, I write every day. I am writing something every day, whether it's a newsletter or an article or a script for a piece of content. But sometimes I'll get an idea and it's like I'll have an idea and then an hour later the newsletter is done. It's done and it just came out so fast. And then other times I've got to write and then I've got to sit and take a break from it and look at it with fresh eyes and then come back to it a few times. So it kind of depends on the piece and the intensity of the piece, and I guess
Mm.
the mood that I'm in the moment.
And outside of book writing, do you do that kind of do you do that those other forms of writing also in the morning? Is that your
Yeah.
typical writing time?
Well,
So
it kind of depends. Not necessarily. I think with writing a book, I have to be more structured and disciplined because there are so many words. And I'm
Mhm.
not a procrastinator. I don't leave things till the last minute. I hate cutting it close with deadlines. So I do become a little bit more regimented with my structure. But throughout the day, I find if it's a newsletter or if it's an article, I'll wait. I'll wait. I feel like writing is almost like my dessert or my snack. So if I've been doing emails or like I do a podcast interview or something and it's like, oh, I want something that feels like candy for my brain, I'll go back and write because that is joyful
Amazing.
for me. So
Amazing.
if I'm not on a deadline for something specific and big, then it's kind of like wherever I feel like I want a snack, I'll go write.
For a reward.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
wild.
Yeah.
So, okay, question about the Book of Boundaries. You were obviously really well known as the co-founder of Whole30, really well known for those nutrition and fitness books. What did your agent say when you said, I want to write a book about boundaries? I'm not a psychotherapist,
I
but
know.
I have a lot to say on this topic, and go.
I woke up in, I think it was September 2020, with a fully formed book proposal in my head for the Book of Boundaries. I'm not kidding. I woke up in the middle of the night and thought, I want to write a book. It's going to be about boundaries. It's going to be called The Little Book of Boundaries. We did change the title eventually, and the concept did change. I got up the next morning and it was still fully formed, and I sent it to my agent and I was like, here's the trajectory. Here's how it stems from Whole30. Here are the conversations I've been having on social media. Here's how I want the book to go. And she immediately was like, absolutely. Yes, already have an editor for you. Like, I'm going to go talk to her right away.
Wow.
So it
Wow.
happened fast. And she
Wow.
was all for it, I think, because I was so able to show the trajectory and the growth of where the
Yeah.
boundaries work came from through my work at Whole30 over the last, it had been 12 years.
You could connect the dots for her and
Yeah.
make it make sense.
Yeah.
That's cool to hear and kind of surprising because I know that I've talked to many authors who want to make a bit of a topic pivot, and it's tricky to manage it, right? It's tricky, to bring it doesn't always work to bring your audience along. People don't always see the relevance, and sometimes you can just get that kind of like blank stare from publishers or agents where they're like, this is too risky. I don't get it. So good for you for clearly connecting the dots, and also what a fortuitous sort of gift
Well,
from
Yeah.
subconscious, self.
This is another example, though, of something that I already had been doing for about a year and a half or 2 years. I had already on my Instagram channel been talking about boundaries with people,
Mhm.
not just around food and drink, although that's a very obvious conversation topic, but my work through Whole30 had led people to start saying, hey, you're really good at helping me say no to the break room pizza or the wine at happy hour. What about my mother-in-law who wants to come visit and she wants to stay for 2 weeks after the baby is born? What do I say to her? So I already had been doing this work and I had this proof of concept and I had been almost writing it in my head. So it's the same pattern, I think, with my other books. It just happened to be a slightly different topic.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I can see the connection. Um,
Yeah.
so, what is your relationship with with your sort of presence on social media and the content creation now? Where do you think you're going with um, your content?
I don't have a content strategy. I know that content strategy and marketing strategy and social media strategy are big things. To me, that makes me feel absolutely suffocated and claustrophobic, and I hate it. I want to show up on social media when I want to, as I want to, and talk about whatever I want to. And if that stifles my growth or doesn't put me in a niche or I'm not seeing the kind of growth that maybe I could, I literally don't care. There are entire weekends where I don't post on Instagram at all. This past weekend, didn't show up once. I was down with my family celebrating my husband's birthday. I took a bunch of photos. I shared them later, but I didn't want to show up. I wanted to stay fully present. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the only way I will do social media is if I get to own my social media presence on my own terms. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. It just makes me feel icky and gross and like my life no longer belongs to me. And that's not acceptable.
Um, so you have, by any measure, found quite a lot of success in your life, in with your books, with your company, et cetera, et cetera. And as you said, the brand is big. My question for you is, how did you find the courage to allow it to become so big? And was there ever a moment where you were at a kind of an inflection point in the company's growth or in the growth of your own kind of personal brand where you balked or almost felt like tempted to rein it in?
No, never. Because the growth and the success of my brand is not about me. And it's not even about the brand. It is about the impact. It is about the impact of the people who it serves. So
Mm-hmm.
now I will say this, I want the brand to be as big and impactful as possible. And also, the rubric or the sort of guideline that I use internally when I think about making business decisions is, does this feel gross? Because I do not want the brand to grow at the expense of me feeling gross about what I've done. So,
Yeah.
are there things that I could do to grow the brand even bigger? Could we make a Whole30 protein shake or a Whole30 snack bar? Or, yes, we could, a Whole30 line of supplements. We could do all of those things. But at no point, and all of those things have been recommended to me by people who have wanted to invest in my company or partner with my company. But at
Mm-hmm.
no point in the past have those felt okay to me. So I have not done them. So,
Mm-hmm.
am I somewhat limiting the exponential growth of Whole30 with the business decisions that we are making? Yes, but that's the only way that I feel good about it. So, as long as I'm making decisions that I feel good about, the brand can and will get as big as it possibly can because that means it's able to help as many people as possible. That's the way I think about it.
And I can really relate to having a giant vision. What I think that I'm an entrepreneur too, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm a woman, and so are you. So, what I have seen in myself sometimes, and certainly in other people in my life, is a moment where there's a tension between the size of the vision and then when the thing starts like actually reaching into that vision, there becomes like a feeling of like, I'm not sure I can hold on to something that big. I'm not sure that I can either maintain control or manage it well or accept that much sort of like high stakes activity, or just the size of the endeavor. Can I hang on to something that huge? And I'm not hearing you say that that was ever a concern of yours.
Okay. That's not exactly true. I have had moments where I have thought to myself, but it's not out of imposter syndrome. It's not out of like, am I good enough or am I worthy enough? It is strictly out of the matter of, has the brand outgrown me as a
Mm.
CEO? Does the brand deserve someone,
Mm.
very often the founder or the CEO of a company who takes it from 0 to 100 is not necessarily the right person to take it from 100 to 1,000. And I am
Right.
asking myself that question regularly so that I don't become the rate limiting factor in the brand's potential. And so, yes, I have had those inflection points, and I have certainly had those moments of like, am I the right person to continue to lead? I think at some point, the answer to that might be no, and I might want to bring on help, or I might want to replace myself and remain the founder, but have someone else run the day to day for the business. That I reserve the right to do that. And if I do that, it will only serve the brand's growth and my vision. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not out of like, has this outgrown me? Am I good enough? Am I, worthy enough?
I
Like
can
that.
hack it.
I don't
Yeah.
believe that. No.
Yeah. All right. Final parting words of support for our listeners, Melissa. What words of advice or encouragement would you have for anyone, especially perhaps women? What do you want them to know about success in creativity, business, or even just their personal lives?
Yeah. I mean, earlier today I shared on an Instagram reel that, I'm quite tall. I'm 5'10", and for a very long time I would shrink and sort of hide, I think, my height, my intelligence, my success. I spent a lot of time when I was younger making myself smaller so as not to make anyone else feel uncomfortable. And I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore. I don't slouch. I don't shrink. If you are uncomfortable because of my height or my intelligence or my success or my presence or self-confidence, that is not my problem. So I think what I would encourage people, because it's very top of mind today, is that you don't have to play small for anybody, and you shouldn't. And I really want to encourage every single person, especially women, don't dim your light for anybody else. Don't dim your shine or make yourself smaller just to make other people comfortable. You deserve to claim that space and to claim your power. And I think every single person can remind themselves of that every single day. I do.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for those final words. Melissa, I have loved this conversation so much. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this time with us.
This was such a unique conversation, and I appreciate it too. Thanks so much, Maggie.
I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give so much of your gift to the world that it expands you into your greatest possible version of yourself. Remember, it's not selfish just because we also benefit from it. And here's where I get to make a selfish request. New podcasts need all the help they can get. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Selfish Gift Podcast. And send me a DM. I'd love to hear how you're sharing your gift with the world.